Okay, we should be going here. Let me start up our little opening logo from Peter. One of these days, we're going to have music for all of this stuff. And I love the little steampunky information flow, passage of time material that Peter came up with. And there is Troubles in Paradise. I am Rulin James Downard. RJ and Hey You and any of these things, and note the tortuganwordpress.com, which is my website. And we will now stop sharing and we will start talking about the things that we're talking about here, which is our current evolution hour, which is going to be on a subject that Jackson Wheat, who is with me today, suggested as a fascinating subject matter. Hi, Jackson. Say hello.
Bonjour, salut,
Oh, we are
bienvenue.
going the French because you are in the Louisiana where they do the bilingual, or you could pretend you're from Canada, in which case they would have to do that as well up
I
there.
had a
Anyway,
friend from Quebec, so
yeah, Quebecois, all of that. Yeah, I understand, just as a complete irrelevancy, that apparently French people can tell the Quebecois accent that it sounds not quite French.
yes,
So
that is
that
true.
they object to all that. There's finicky bastards. Anyway, this was about a subject matter that you had brought up. Oh, I see BJ is in the room. Hi, got our first person in there. Salut, James and Jackson. This one is a subject matter that you brought up, which came about because you had just done a wonderful piece, as all of your pieces are magnificent. I learn a hell of a lot from each time, on the issue of bacteria and archaebacteria and Loki-bacteria and all of the fascinating deep roots of multicellularity and biological systems that make us what we are, that they have a thing that go back in choanoflagellates and a whole bunch of other things over the years, and how anti-evolutionists don't think about that much. And it was something I had noticed, and it's something that you have noticed as well. Isn't that right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I've seen. I mean, aside from the big obvious things like bacterial flagella, they really seem to skirt protozoans and
Yeah.
other prokaryotes.
And what's so weird about it is how prominent that work is by comparison in the actual science. The choanoflagellates, that was one of them that I keep a little flag on, because a whole bunch of biological systems that we use are showing up in the choanoflagellates, which don't use them for the same things we do.
Right.
And that's what's so interesting about it, because the whole idea is co-opting, that a biological system doesn't spring full blown. It arises over a very long period of time. I put up, let me do a little others of my stupid screen shares here. Bink bunk and watching the old person attempt to do high-tech material. And this is available. I put a link up in the description because it's available at my tip site. This was a thing that a friend of mine and I did for a Darwin Day about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was I wanted the entire history of the universe on a single sheet, but stuff where you'd be able to see things to scale. And I never liked the calendar approach. I didn't like the spiral. I didn't like the clock approach because it misses one or the other scale. And you can see up here at the top, this is the whole big picture here, and then color coding for the Earth part, and the same color coding down below. And then this Phanerozoic era spreads out to be the stuff where the business end, where you have mass extinctions and the appearance of various forms of life. Well, what we're talking about here is this middle zone here, where the very earliest, as soon as things cool down enough, so the late heavy bombardment stops and liquid water oceans get stable, and that life is certainly going by 3.8 billion years ago, maybe even earlier. And it was a cellular life of some form, but not necessarily the LUCA, last universal common ancestor, that everyone's familiar with. And then this long period here before we get down to oxygen producing cyanobacteria. And then another long haul where multicellular life is starting to kick in about 1 billion years ago. And there's a whole bunch of transitional elements that are showing up that we can see in organisms now when they work out the genes as to how long ago these things were diverging for common ancestry, are in this little zone in here after the cyanobacteria, but before multicellularity. And that's a lot of turf to cover. Would you agree that that's kind of an accurate summary of the picture there, Jackson?
I would definitely say so.
Okay, I'll keep this up here for a little bit longer, and said everybody can get this thing. They can download it for free. Please do so. We're thinking maybe someday I can work up an app that can do a lot of this stuff on a handheld that you could have on a computer. There's something. So anybody who knows about how to do apps, say hi on that one. But the thing is that struck me about that huge time frame is we're used to thinking in terms of vertebrates, where everything runs gangbusters for the last half-billion years, and it seems as though everything's going slow as molasses, which in some way it is. But I think what has been the amazing discovery of the last 20 years, certainly, certainly since the turn of the century, is looking in great detail, now that they can do full genomes, of finding out exactly what genes are knocking around in all of these protozoa and archaebacteria and lochibacteria, and see how cell membrane systems work and all this kind of stuff. That is opening up a whole new window of the kinds of things that were changing in that seemingly static boop, boop, archaeal domain that was running on for billions of years without much going on. But in fact, a lot was going on, and probably very complex new food change webs, new interactions between predators and prey, because some bacteria munch on other bacteria. And so you've got a very busy environment going on there that we don't know directly about because it never shows up as fossils. So all you see are little
Right.
chains of things like stromatolites or something, where you have a colonial organism that's similar to what we have already, and those are cyanobacteria, I think, that are involved in the
Oh yeah.
uh,
The oldest fossils are only older than the oldest stromatolites by, I think uh it's like 70 million years, I think, or something like
Yeah,
that.
and so trying to
Um
piece together forensically what
and
was going on, and then try to figure how much of that organism was identical to or similar to, or maybe not, to what they appear to be their counterparts today, is
Right.
a fascinating piece of paleoecology to working out. To
Yep.
some extent, I bet you there will be inferential things. They'll be able, in some cases, certain organisms or certain biological processes prefer certain isotopes, and they're able to tell by isotope balances that certain things are going on biologically, even though you don't know the details of what it is doing the biology, but you can tell the effects of it. So you're looking at the shadows and the little footsteps, ichnofossil counterparts
Mhm.
here that are interesting clues. And it's always fascinating. I'm sure you've read enough of the technical literature, just as well as I have, that it's just fascinating, the detective mentality that they have to go to piece together all of this stuff from so far in advance of the facts. And it's really neat. But anyway, back to our creationists. It's cricket sounds over in their world, that the only time the bacteria or any of that bunch come up are two main things. One of which can be done either by an intelligent designer or a young earth creationist, and that's the gee whiz stuff. Oh, the wonderful bacteria that is required in our guts, or the wonderful bacteria that do things with lichens, or the wonderful bacteria that do these things. And it's God's providence in designing everything in a Panglossian way to make sure that life is sweet and wonderful. Meanwhile, you've got the not nice things that bacteria can do, the diseases and the malfunctions and the
Well, that's
parasitism and
just
all the other,
Satan.
yeah, all that. Well, that's all due to the fall, you see. And so that's
Mhm.
and so then there's a little bit, you may have bumped into some of the things, a little bit of stuff the young earth creationists think about, and you'll notice intelligent designers never bother with this. And that is, was the design of parasitical bacteria and the like designed into them to begin with? And so it was God's providence, knowing about the fall, to preemptively design in the pieces that are going to allow little teeny protozoans to act as parasites on later organisms for the great providential plan that they don't think too much about it. Oh, Beach says they love stromatolites. That's and the fall. James beat me to it. Ha ha. There we go. Yeah. That this is about the level of the discussion that happens in young earth creationism land on it. But over in intelligent design land, it's nothing. Why? Because they don't care. And when you look, Steve or Ken Miller, when he was having a debate with Bill Dembski and a couple other intelligent designers, and I can't remember who the other one was. I don't know whether it was Robert Prothero or Kevin Padian. But anyway, it was like the American Museum of Natural History, and this was maybe early 2000s. I'm just going off my memory here, but it's been a long time ago. Anyway, they were asking, maybe it could have even been in the 90s. Anyway, they were talking about the flagellum, which of course was the poster child. And Dembski was there, and Behe, and Miller tried to pin him down on when the flagellum was designed, and couldn't do it. You couldn't get Bill Dembski to figure out when the bloody flagellum appeared, and that's because he doesn't have a map of time. What I put up in my little portable map of time chart literally isn't knocking around in their heads. As an abstraction, yes. Steve Meyer and all the gang in there know as a pure abstraction that the Cambrian was 500 million years ago, and there was billions of years before that, and the Big Bang was way back, and blah, blah, blah. But the idea that that means that there is a series of time slices where things would be going on, and that if they have a model of intelligent design, there should have been design events happening in that time stream at some point, and that they would need to think through from their own frame what a design event looks like if you were going to get in a time machine and go back and watch the flagellum being designed. What would you see? Would you see Zot, a whole organism appearing? Would you see an organism that doesn't have a flagellum suddenly sprout one? Would you see suddenly shifting around where suddenly motor proteins are being pulled into place like somebody with a Lego block set? What would you see? Do we see anything like that currently? Are there any design events currently? How many design events were there that we can catalog? So this is the counterpart of creationists trying to tell us how many kinds there are, that they're never going to be able to do that. And design events are something they're never going to be able to pin down, but they don't even try. So all of that big blob that I pointed out in the big splotch there over billions of years, the blue part and the others on the map of time, is just a terra incognito in their own brains. It's as if it's just here be dragons, and that's as far as it goes.
Yeah, it is very interesting. I just didn't really encounter much of anything from them when doing my research for really the videos after the vertebrates. So
Yeah.
pretty much like after, I guess, was it 3? Maybe, yeah, I think 3, 4, 5, and 6. They just kind of
there's no one to react to. Yeah, because you get, and as I discovered this in working on Evolution Slam Dunk, and I put a link up to that. Everybody should get my book on the reptile-mammal transition. That was a topic that wasn't being discussed in the anti-evolution literature much. Only 20 people have even bumped into it, and every single one of them crashes and burns. Why? In part because it wasn't a squeaky wheel. So creationists of all stripes, including intelligent designers, we have some other people showing up, going to go for it. Oh, he's just joined the video, our hangout. Hans, hello, Hans. He says hi to Peter. Hello, Peter, say hello. Peter? Unmute and say hello.
Hello.
There you go. Yeah, this one is an intriguing subject because we're going to be talking about something that's, I put the heading up in the video, dogs not barking in the night. If you're familiar with the old Sherlock Holmes story, The Silver Blaze, I think it is, where Holmes calls Watson's attention to the curious incident of the dog barking in the night. And Watson says, but the dog didn't bark in the night. That is the curious incident. And so what we're talking about here is the absence of discussion of a huge set of the domain of life. Most life is bacterial, which is reason why Lynn Margulis and all that could be so smug on a lot of her comments over the years, because there's an awful lot going on. We are functionally a habitat for bacteria, our bodies. There are more bacterial cells on us and in us than there are us cells. This is a very disconcerting thing to remember. We're kind of a bag of water with some hard parts that is acting as a habitat for bacteria. We couldn't digest food without them. The termites couldn't eat wood if it weren't for their their bacterial endosymbionts and all that. So lichens are fungi that have semi-enslaved bacteria. I mean, there's a whole world out there that's amazing and creepy and astonishing, and it is at the very root of the genetic systems that are used by us for very different things nowadays, which of course is that evolution thing. So the idea that I was putting up is that you'd have to pay attention to all this bloody data in order to make sense out of anything. This would be just as true for creationists as intelligent designers, and yet it's cricket sounds. No curiosity at all about it. No attempt to explain it from their own framework. I noticed that on the dinosaur thing too, when I wrote Dynamania in the old hashtag tip, that I was really pissed that I wasn't going to be able to use all my dinosaur knowledge because nobody was talking about dinosaurs. And then I thought, that's the interesting thing. They're not talking about dinosaurs. Why? And it turns out the only ones who kind of sort of did were the young Earth creationists, and they've got to discuss dinosaurs because they got to have them on Noah's Ark. So they have to deal with them. But intelligent designers don't have that problem, so they don't think about them at all. Oh. And so the bacteria are just a further element involved. And I don't, if for those of you who are familiar with Steve Meyer's Darwin's Doubt and Signature in the Cell, those his two big books, he insists with a straight face constantly that the Cambrian explosion is inexplicable because of all the new genetic information that had to appear in order to produce the Cambrian explosion. And I'm going, what new genetic information? Homeobox genes? So sonic hedgehog, bone morphological protein, the cell adhesion proteins. These things are all predating metazoans. They go back a long way, and sometimes a very long way, as the choanoflagellates and some of the stuff with the Loki bacteria that Jackson pointed out in his video. So let me hand this off to you, Jackson, because you did a wonderful summary of all of that, about all the different genetic systems that are popping up in these very deep-rooted organisms that creationists don't pay any attention to.
Yeah, I just looked it up on Answers in Genesis because I was intrigued to see what sort of information they would have on it. Turns out they have a few articles. I typed in the word choanoflagellate. Their first article that pops up is by Elizabeth Mitchell. So you know how good she is at relaying the data. But yeah, so I was trying to channel my inner ancestor's tale while doing this series. I also recognize that Aaron Ra is doing his series, but going forward through time. So I was like, I'll go backwards.
And I'm the same way. I'm a forward guy. So I start at the early part and work direction. You're going in the backwards direction, and it just drives me nuts.
Well, see, one of the things I like about going backwards, one of my favorite points by Dawkins about going backwards is that you destroy the notion of directionality, because you look at a textbook and it starts with bacteria in this chapter, then protozoans and plants, and it just works its way up,
and then you forget about
the last chapter.
Yeah. And that's a legitimate point. That's a very good point. And what it would be is that when I'm doing the forward thing, I'm not forgetting all the cousins.
Right.
So when I'm looking at that, when I see a deep root like the basal reptile, air quotes, reptiles, and that splits off into what eventually become the reptiles we know, and the archosaurs that lead off to the dinosaurs and birds, and our side that form the synapsids and goes off to the our reptile mammal transition, I'm aware of both of those at once. So I don't lose track of that. But it is true that in the usual ladder of progress thing, where everybody ends up at human beings, you forget that the human beings are there, and the rest of the vertebrates and the invertebrates and the bacteria and all of that. And we're part of a huge, elaborate ecosystem where all of those have gone on over billions of years of evolution, just like we did. We just happen to be the one little lineage. So the backwards approach is very useful in that context. It's just because I tend to think the opposite way, I'm constantly having to I'm peeling back the onion in my head when I'm wanting to try to put it in as stepping stones. So it conceptually is one that trips me up a bit, because it's not the way I usually think of, but it's still fabulously illuminating, because then you get down into these deep little things. So whenever I'm looking at the common ancestor of something, I think probably conceptually the best thing that everybody can do, here's how I do it, is that very point. When you hear common ancestor, you have to think of a node in time, and that node in time produces all of its descendants. and you have to have a sense in your head, at least a rough heuristic of where all of those lineages go. So you don't have to know every little fiddly bit detail, but to realize that when you're looking at a choanoflagellate or a common ancestor of us and choanoflagellates, that common ancestor includes the present day choanoflagellates and us. And so that's what common ancestor means. I hear all the time when they talk about that, well, somebody is related to King Henry VIII, you know. We're all related to King Henry VIII. We're all related to lettuce. everything is related by natural branching common descent. So now the question is, how closely are you related? How far back is your common ancestor? So whatever common ancestor you and I and Peter have with Henry VIII, probably you have to go way far back to find one, but there will be one, because all human beings are part of a single species, and therefore we're all cousins. So
it's funny that you brought up that we're related to lettuce, because Vice Rhino is doing a series right now on this guy called A Bit of Orange, I think.
Yeah, A Bit of Orange.
Yeah, and so one of the pictures that A Bit of Orange keeps tossing up is like the common ancestor between a wolf and lettuce, and the common ancestor is a head of lettuce with a wolf heads on it. Or wolf head.
Yeah, there we go. That's your crocoduck approach. Yeah. And whereas it shows that not only have they a snarky sense of humor, but they are deaf as dull as a sack of hammers, ignorant on what common ancestors mean. And that the whole point of a common ancestor is that it's going to be neither one or the other. That it won't look, if you look at cats and dogs, their common ancestors are the Miacids. It's neither a cat nor dog. It's got some things that are sort of dog-like and some things that are kind of cattish. But if you were to look at it, you would probably not call it either a cat or a dog. Why? Because it's a common ancestral form. It's not any of the form. The same way as when you're looking at the dinosaurs, common ancestor between say Stegosaurus and a bird, you've got to go all the way back to the basal dinosaur lineages, where you've got basically a teeter-totter animal that's a bipedal form with a long balancing tail and a long neck. And that's what all the early dinosaurs look like. And they have specialized features that eventually shunt them onto sightings, where one of which ends up eventually looking like a stegosaur, and one of them eventually ends up looking like a tyrannosaur, and another one ends up looking like your chicken dinner.
I actually explained the relationship of Miacids to cats and dogs last week, because there was a group of street preachers that tour the colleges, and so they came here, and I sat down with one of them while he wasn't yelling at students, and I was asking him about his conception of kinds, and told him that bears and seals and weasels were also related to dogs, and asked him, because he started out saying there was a dog kind and a cat kind, and that like wolves, coyotes, and dogs were the dog kind. So I said, well, what about bears? And I explained to him like the amphicyonids, and then explained to him how they were.
His eyes were glazing over at that point, I presume.
Well, he actually seemed fairly interested.
Talking about eyes glazing over, I have sent A Bit of Orange an invite to come on our channel.
Ooh.
So if he accepts, Jackson, I'd like you to co-host, and maybe we can have James on standby when things get rough and he wants to go down the real nitty-gritty of getting the papers. So
I would be happy to be there, as quiet as a little church mouse, and whenever you need to call upon me, you can release the RJ.
I think we both know that A Bit of Orange is not touching technical papers. He is grabbing that Answers in Genesis. If he's grabbing Answers in Genesis at all, he might just be riffing off of, or he might just be hearing this from Ken Ham Speaketh.
Well, your street preacher that you were running into.
I'm pretty sure his source material stems from Kent Hovind.
Oh yeah, you're right. I remember that now.
A lot of Kent Hovind stuff coming past.
And he's very popular. This is not at all uncommon. I bump into Hovindistas, both online and in person, way more often than I will ever bump into somebody that's read a Michael Behe book, even if they use intelligent design jargon. This is just simple the fact of the demographics. There are tons of people that watch videos, and Hovind's videos have been popular for years. So there are people that have grown up steeped in Dr. Kent Hovind. And so they're, by definition, relying on somebody who already is a secondary redactor, because Kent Hovind is not a primary source guy. He is not a primary fact claimant in anti-evolutionism. He's a secondary redactor who copies other creationists, largely fringe people and largely old stuff that he got in the 1980s.
Yeah, that's one of the trademarks of a Hovind argument is that that claim, the only thing you can tell about a fossil is that the animal died.
Yeah,
which,
yeah.
You know,
And
they
so
know
this
nothing about taphonomy or paleoecology or any of that.
And it's intrinsically
that's the major problem, because Hovind made a lot of videos and he didn't copyright any of his material, so the videos are free. They are mirrored, I think, dozens of times on YouTube, and that's where creationists go. They don't read papers; they watch videos, and I know it's your show, James, but I know you won't mind. I have to give a shout out about the present I got today. When I joined, you were talking about the flagellum. Jackson did an awesome video about the evolution of the flagellum. So I think that's the material we need to reach these people. We need to have videos. We need to have videos they might be able to understand and might be a reason for them to.
Oh, I will second that completely. And if anything, what I love about Jackson's stuff is he's very concise and compact, and there are always source links directly to it. It's a wonderful example of a method. You're way more concise than I am, in fact, because I can ramble on about things, especially on our evolution hours.
I appreciate that, but one of my problems that I fear almost every time I make a video now is when I go to a place like PNAS or ResearchGate or something like that, and I see at the top provided by LSU, I'm like, oh crap, that means I'm going to see the full paper, but my audience isn't, and that just sucks. I think.
Well, the one thing I make a great point of doing is hunting around as somebody not on a conventional bit. I'm impoverished schmuck here, so I can't afford to buy any of those things, and I can't afford to get past things. So all the linkages that I put up on my videos are always ones that I know will directly link to the full text paper free. So PNAS is easy peasy, at least for any paper that's over a year old. All access at PNAS is open access from a year since. Most of the major biological journals are open access. Where you get into trouble are geology and paleontology, because that is not, though some creationists seem to think that paleontology is a road to riches and that people are in paleontology only because of the vast amounts of money and popularity that they get. Oh, yikes.
Yeah, see Trevor Val if you want to talk about the economics of paleontology.
Yeah, it's a thing that you do it because you love it and you really want to know the truth, and you endure the most dismal circumstances of climbing up rock faces and running around in 120-degree weather and being shot at by terrorists. And I mean, this is the world of the field paleontologist in virtually any area. And so you've got and the journals in those areas are still pretty much subscriber pay. It's not there are huge amounts of money involved in this thing so they have to basically rely upon that. So most of the geology journals and most of the paleontology stuff is still behind paywalls. But between ResearchGate and Academia EDU, a huge chunk of it is available free. And then there are also the delicious paleontologists and the like that post their papers as PDFs on their website and their academic websites, or college courses that often post the papers as freebies so that people can do them in the course of their material. So I, as a observer with no money, believe me, when I can find the free paper, yipes, oh boy. And then I will download it. And that's absolutely critical. So the main rule then is always to make sure that the links you have are to full text so that everybody that can follow up on them. And so that means sometimes restricting the kinds of stuff that you put up as links in order that it will always be open access, that anybody that can link on it, regardless of their income, has access to it. Jerry Coyne drives me nuts in a lot of his things where he talks about, oh, free paper. No, it isn't. It's free on your stupid college network, but not regular people can't click on it and get it free. And you really got to stop thinking that they can.
I do also want to say on the back to the flagellum video that I just made. One of the things I was thinking about, because Peter requested the video, was I love Tony Reed's stuff. How Creationism Taught Me Real Science is one of my favorite series on YouTube. And so that was my first thought, and I had to think of a way to do a video about the evolution of the flagellum without doing what he did. I didn't just want to rehash, this is how you build a flagellum. So
and you did a great job, and you mentioned him in the video, which I think was a great touch, because after watching yours, I suggest they watch Tony Reed's channel as well, because he's also he makes amazing content.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love his videos. I've learned so much.
I was amazed his video didn't come up when I did a search, so that's why I asked you, and you actually pointed me.
It never surprises me how awkward some things are on Google search. Remember, you have Google is already tainted by the fact that certain interest groups can weight their content in such a way that they will trigger the search above other people, so they get priority, and ads and others. And of course, if we move into the era of more and more companies being allowed to skew material to market forces, that's probably only going to continue. Even sometimes when I'm looking up the primary source title, full text, that I know exists because I physically got it and I'm trying to find it again because I got a printout of it, it won't always pop up in a search, and I have to sometimes ferret my way around in a lot of different directions. So for all of you out there in Google searching that don't necessarily get what you want first time around, or even going down through 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pages on the thing, come at it from a variety of directions. The thing that I have used, and I'll bet Jackson has done the same thing, is that what you want to find is a really good technical summary argument. Somebody that's an expert in the field that does a review that's available. And that acts as an open window, because they're now letting you peek over their shoulders as to the primary source technical work. And when you follow up on their sources in their work, then you can basically catch up with them. And those are the ones that I really love, review papers like that.
Yeah. So
the other thing was, I didn't do a Google search. I did a search on YouTube, because I was looking for a video and he didn't come up. So
that is really weird.
Even there again, it's just a matter of how the searching things go up and the filters that are put through. I'm amazed that any of it happens at all. But the one rule is that the information is there in some form somewhere. That we now live in a landscape of scientific invention that is just astonishing, and probably 80% of it is accessible in some venue or other, either directly from the papers or excellent summary reviews, and when we get there, we're up to like 90% level, or good videos that describe it. And in anything, however, always check provenance. The farther you are removed from the primary source, the more wary you want to be, regardless of who's doing the shtick, because now you're too far away. If anybody, even a scientist, does a video that may be perfectly fine, but there's no links in it, there's no things in the description where that you can lead on to other things, that bothers me. And in this day and age, it's not good enough. We need to always have things. So any video needs to have linkages so that people who want to look further can find ways of doing that.
I agree. And I have to say, Beach just threw in a thing that I've used myself. Going to Wikipedia, and I know Wikipedia isn't always the best source to go to, but they do have the links at the bottom where you can go directly to the source material. And
I use Wikipedia too. And it's from a methods point of view, it's perfectly valid as a gateway. It's not a destination. And it can even tell you stuff. For example, in paleontology, I'll look up stuff and I'll check the Wikipedia page and I'll find, oh, they don't have any sources, or it's all a secondary source from some newspaper account or some press release. I'm going, whoop, that's cutting edge. That's not yet hit the main technical literature yet. Be wary of that. Let the dust settle. And so you can use Wikipedia as a measure of the state of the art about what is and is not known, but never take it as a destination. Example, you've read a Slam Dunk in the section where I raked Denton over the coals for relying on a Wikipedia article, and worse, on the dinosaur matter. Worse, the Wikipedia article was quite good, and it contained sources in it on feathered dinosaurs, and also Alibardi's work on developmental biology of feathers that were therefore right under his eyeballs in that Wikipedia article, but it never dawned on him to look. So Wikipedia is a very useful window and an opening to things. Just don't treat it as a finished destination. I would never cite it as a final thing, but it can become also a cause celeb. The big debate about when Wikipedia decided to pull Gunter Beckley, who's an intelligent design-oriented paleontologist that's now with the Discovery Institute. And they've decided they got to trim back the listing of him. And I pointed out, no, I wouldn't have done that at all. I would still have listed all of his technical papers and all the things. I wouldn't have removed it at all. No, but it's also fair to call out that he is now a squishy, intelligent designer, and we're going to see what happens with him. So I'm a great believer in never distort information, never remove information. The information is neither good nor bad. It needs to be there. And so attempts to kind of clean up and, oh, well, this guy's an intelligent designer, we can trim his a Wikipedia listing because of that. No. I want you to see it. I don't want you to miss it. That's part of the information flow, and everybody gets to pay attention to all of this. Let me pause a little bit here to do another happy little screen search on my wonderful world of can rattling. Let me do this, and Downard has to go back over to find. I found the screen pair button right off the bat. Yay! And come on. Click, 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 you little bastard. Okay, and we'll share that. Everybody should be seeing my world's famous, like, yeah, right. My tip patrons, Stephen and Dyer and Eat and Yui and Mona and Hendril and Jen and Jody and Daniel and Ralph and Eric and Benjamin and Staggles and Alex and Totis Real and Everett and Paul. Thank you all. I'm highlighting my tortucanwordpress.com. I used Peter's, I've got Peter's logo that I'll be popping up at the end of things, that little badge they designed for me. There's a Patreon for the video things, although I do want to point out that the money that comes into that is really slow to get to me, which is rather frustrating. A more direct thing, which is why I decided to enlarge the typeface, the GoFundMe.com, that gets to me bloody fast. And as yet, we've got, between all of these, under 200 people at the moment have been supporting the project. I've got 2,000 followers on Twitter, but not 2,000 supporters. And I could certainly use way more on that front. I'm a volunteer supported group that is a group of one. I'm me. And I'm doing work that nobody has done before. The TIP project, I'll do a short description of that. TIP project is documenting the full range of anti-evolution source citations. This has never been done before. I didn't start out doing that. I was doing also criticizing creationism and intelligent design, and making a point about putting out why a methods approach of looking at source data was relevant. But in the course of working out things and getting up to the spreadsheet level, where I would now be able to keep track of all of the tens of thousands of sources in my data set, a light bulb went off a few years ago where I go, wait a minute, I can just add another analysis where I can literally measure which technical sources have been cited and which haven't. No one's ever measured this before, literally. If you want to know whether or not there was a case where somebody, we were talking on a Twitter line about a particular biological issue, and I cited a particular technical paper, and I put out that, oh, by the way, no creationist has ever cited this. And as far as I can tell, no creationist has ever cited it, because I don't have a little black box next to it. So because I would keep track of that. And gradually, as I continue to plow through the data field and go back, Jackson had just brought up a subject to show you what I do in this thing when I'm not people see me on Twitter, that's a side thing I'm doing. I'm actually doing all my tip work until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I stop and eventually go to sleep. But Jackson brought up these topoisomerases because I was vetting a thing he was doing on the subject that came up, and it intrigued me. And I had just a little bit on it in tips, so I was doing some more research on it, and I found a creationist that I hadn't heard of before, who's a geneticist, a biologist, and a microbiologist, and still publishes on the subject, but he's a young Earth creationist, and I hadn't heard about him before, this guy DeVries. And he had just done a criticism where he was arguing that the topoisomerases were intelligently designed and examples of God's providence and all that kind of stuff. And he had a huge number of technical papers that he was citing in this thing, about 30 or 40 of them. And so I'm tracking all of those down. I just finished that process. Most of them I was able to find full text and plugging them into my data stream and then following up on all the research on this. And one thing that I was able to study, since I've done some more topoisomerase stuff, some of which was in Jackson's piece and some other material that I had found, and I think I called them to your attention as well. Now I could look at his analysis and whether or not he ever mentioned any of these technical papers on the evolution of the topoisomerases, not just what they did, but how the evolution generated what they did. And it turned out none of those papers were cited by him. So here he was being very picky choosy, even though he had a huge number of technical citations going back, including his own work. He is avoiding thinking about the dynamics of how that evolved because he doesn't allow that to be true. And that's what a source methods analysis does. So I can state with smug satisfaction that anti-evolutionists miss 90% of the data field. I'm not guessing, I'm measuring. And I'd love to keep going at this measuring thing and keep going at the things that I'm doing here. Reason why I'm bundled up like this is because I can't afford enough fuel to raise the temperature above 50 in the house. So I got to ration everything out until spring. And I'm on Social Security. I get income from my books. So everybody buy my books, especially Slam Dunk. I've had few sales this month, so it's been nice. And I'll get that at the end of February. The royalties come from Amazon pretty quickly. And the GoFundMe that comes in. One thing I have yet to have happen, and it is a worrisome thing, but not surprising, is the crowdfunding angle. Is that our side doesn't do crowd well. We don't do indirect reciprocity connecting up. We don't do leaps of faith. Duh. And that's the kind of stuff that creationists and religious believers do effortlessly. Breitbart does it effortlessly. They can alert to some poor person who doesn't want to cater to gay weddings, and literally in 2 days, 20,000 people will have given $300,000 to them. Boop, just like that. Wow. I'd love to be able to get responses like that. So it's not that there aren't thousands of people out there that could help. $5, yeah, that challenge. But I think we don't do that very well.
I think the big difference here, James, is that the people who are spending their money there are spending it on God Almighty, and so you'll never be able to compete with God.
It's part of it, but also our side is not good at crowdfunding. There have been a lot of people I bumped into who have done Patreons or have done various things where they tried to crowdsource their projects, and it falls flat. Why? Not because there aren't enough people, not because they don't have the connections. They can have 10,000 followers, but yet pulling them together to where they pull together is something that cognitively we don't really do too well. And I actually got a little tiny peg in my work where I'm looking at this interesting issue from a cognitive theory point of view, because I know from my tip research that anti-evolutionists are relentlessly politically conservative. And we know from the cognitive research that conservative brains literally have a different cognitive architecture and personality traits than liberals. And although not all atheists and freethinkers are liberals, we tend more towards that direction. And I'm much more likely, I'm much more likely to bump into a Bernie Sanders supporter at an atheist convention than I am at a Ken Ham convention. So you do have that kind of dynamic balance. And so in principle, if there are these Tortugan ruts that pop up, the ability not to think about things you don't want to think about, it may very well be occurring in a different way in our cognitive architecture. And so it keeps us disconnected in certain ways. That the old cliche that getting atheists to get together on something is like herding cats may be much more literally true than we'd like to think. And so it's something that I'm clawing up a wall that I'm never going to be able to get to the top to, and I recognize that. But nonetheless, I just put down the gauntlet that in principle, there are more than enough people out there that if a bunch of them just plop down $5, I could be whoop over hurdles in a flash. But we're not very good at that. So anyway, there's the extended commercial for the TIP project and all of that. Yeah. Well, this is technically a expanded personal hobby. I started this 20 years ago because I was pissed off at the intelligent design movement. And I could see that it was doing bad science. I had seen Philip Johnson up there at Whitworth here in Spokane when he came in, and they invited Ken Miller as like the sandbag lone evolutionist and ganged up on him. That was the first time I ever bumped into Steve Meyer and all of that. And I began to pay attention to this methodological angle. I discovered that Philip Johnson was very bright. He got to Harvard when he was 16, so clearly being an anti-evolutionist didn't mean you were necessarily stupid. And then I discovered Richard Milton, who was a minor player on the scene, but he was something I thought was impossible. He's a young earth creationist without being religious. He's not a creationist at all, and yet he doubts the age of the earth. Why? Because he reads creationists and accepts everything they say. He's a credulous idiot. And so he was my poster child for scholarly incompetence. And he was also editor of British Mensa magazine. So that means that the religion and intellect issues were now off the table. The core problem that was going on in anti-evolutionism couldn't be just about religion or intellect because of Milton and Philip Johnson. Maybe it was something deeper. And as I dived in more and more and more, by the time I was into about 2005, 2006 or 7, I was beginning to formulate this Tortugan model, which was that there was a property in the brain I called Matthew Harrison Brady syndrome, after the character that was the analog of William Jennings Bryan in Inherit the Wind, where at the actual Scopes trial, he said he doesn't think about things he doesn't think about. And Darrow said, you ever think about the things you do think about? It's a hilarious exchange that actually happened. And I realized when I was looking at Richard Milton, I think that's what I was seeing, that it wasn't that he was being obtuse. His brain just didn't think about certain things at certain points. And what if that was a real property? And we know from things on cognitive dissonance and a confirmation bias, there's a broad literature on this subject, but that they may have not got as far as they could because they would be making a false assumption. If you were looking at trying to identify the stupid part of the brain, the little stupid index, the little module that does that, and you ask people, do you think the earth is flat? And then you would ask somebody else. So some say the earth is flat and some say it isn't. And you're looking at their brains and you're seeing what parts light up. And you're trying to find the part that lights up for the people who think the earth is flat and isn't lighting up for the non-flat earthers, or vice versa. Well, this MHCS module could be firing on both of them, because it could easily be deflecting things. And so that there would be a system that generates the flat earth thinker, but it also may be occurring in the non-flat earth thinker, but you're not noticing it because you're not asking the right questions and approaching it from the right directions. So gradually, I then built up to where I am now at this methods question. That's the diagnostic. You want to start identifying Tortugans, you ask them what their sources are and how they check them. And boy, do you get deer in the headlights a lot.
Yeah.
Pause for breath. And
yeah,
it occurs across the board.
I actually, one of my followers suggested the other day that I try to get in touch with True Empiricism and maybe have him on my channel, and I'd like to see that interaction that we could have, because had the last conversation I had with the creationist on my channel was Dave Wotzel, who's a nice guy. I like him, but
most creationists are perfectly amiable.
Yeah, yeah. He didn't have a whole lot of sources. His favorite thing was the what was it called? The bell, the little coal bell from England or whatever. Which I've I've actually been doing research on that, and
That's
their
that's not
best
that's not from England.
or where was
That's
from? I'm sorry. Yeah.
that's from a different London in the U.S.
That
So
pickaxe that was found in the coal seam or something like that.
Well, it's a little
yeah.
bell, but regardless,
Mm.
Oh yeah,
I've
no,
been
no, I'm sorry, my mistake. The bell wasn't the London artifact. That was the hammer.
okay.
Mm.
The hammer was a London artifact. Okay, so I got
Yeah.
all mixed up and backwards there. Anyways, so I was doing research about it. I get less so now than I was shortly after my conversation with Wotzel, and I found out that the best argument from the creationist camp is that the kid who found it or allegedly found it, whatever, took a polygraph test and passed. That's their
Therefore, it
best
must be
argument.
true.
You
Yes,
have to.
no one's ever been a psychopath and they was able to pass a polygraph test.
Both
Yeah.
both those things, I think, are now in Karl Baugh's um, museum, and I use
Oh yeah,
museum
and the Mount
quite
Blanco one
inappropriately here.
has similar things like that. There's a small
But
body of what I would call lower echelon wackaloon creationists, the ones that make Kent Hovians seem reasonable, that are the ones that Kent often relies on. And there's this subculture, and they love to find these things, out of place artifacts. And there's a whole lore that goes back actually decades, in the anti-evolution biz, and it relates to stuff that connects up to ancient astronauts and Atlantis lore
Oh
and
yeah.
Sitchins.
Trey
There's a whole
Trey the
bunch of little
Explainer does videos on stuff like that, and including like cryptozoology, and absolutely
yeah,
wonderful videos. I love his stuff.
and it,
yeah, but
so
you have to keep in mind that everything that ends up in the hands of Karl Baugh will never be examined
No. Yeah.
oh, by
outside
their
outside
believers, no. If
any
anybody who
outside
can
any
take Karl Boss
creationist field.
seriously can't be taken seriously. That's definition. Baugh, I bumped into him initially back again in the 1990s when I was starting to work on TIP. And if you read in Dynamania, and everybody, if you haven't read Dynamania, hi the hell not. That's my thing on flood geology and creationism, young Earth creationism, at the TIP website. And Baugh was telling me that he was just started work on making his hyperbaric chamber, if you're familiar with that, that he was going to recreate flood environment, flood conditions, high pressure and the like, and that this was going to prove that the flood conditions would produce giantism. So that's why there were giant dinosaurs. And he was telling me that he was going to make a Dimetrodon dinosaur. That's what he called it. A Dimetrodon dinosaur in a terrarium by taking a Gila monster, apparently, and putting it under high pressure, and he was going to get a Dimetrodon dinosaur out of that. Of course, Dimetrodons aren't dinosaurs, and a Gila monster is a diapsid, and so if you could get a synapsid reptile out of that, boy, you're doing a real amazing thing. Well, needless to say, no bulletin ever emerged from the Baugh company about generating his Dimetrodon dinosaur because it's physically impossible. It's preposterous. But yet there are still people today. I think he's been bumped from TBN. Trinity Broadcasting Network showed his show for quite a few years, but I think he's finally been bumped off of that. But they still go and do stuff on video on YouTube's. So they've got a network of thing, and it's that lower echelon grassroots network. The ones that still typically they'll mention the Paluxy tracks and all of that. Kent Hovind still relies on that sort of stuff. And this
I
is
should do a
way
video on
far.
those sometime.
This is way far removed from your intelligent design gang. When you have somebody like Steve Meyer or Douglas Axe preening in front of a collegiate audience somewhere, or Paul Nelson and Axe flying down to Brazil to lecture a new intelligent design organization that they've just started up down there, which just happened. Or go to Europe to do the same thing. They're fomenting the stuff that you get at the Discovery Institute. They're miles away from the kind of wackaloon grassroots stuff that you find from Loma Linda University graduates that are going around trying to find evidence for the flood. So you need to keep track of the pecking order and the structure of the intercollegiate network. to find out who's all players on this. And when you get down to the grassroots level, which you do when you bump into people on Twitter or on YouTube's and that sort of stuff, you're more likely to bump into a bomb person or a Jovinista or people who make it up as they go along, like Ben Falcon does, and some of these others, where they're just inventing their own creationism. And these things cross-fertilize down at that lower level, and they show up percolating up the food chain a little bit. But long before you ever get to the Answers in Genesis Institute for Creation research level, and way below the little rarefied collegiate bunch of the Discovery Institute, even though they may bump into them, because you've got young Earth creationists now whose work is being extolled at the Discovery Institute. Jeffrey Tompkins was just being pushed by Denise O'Leary just a little ways ago.
Wodzel's article that he has on his website about the stegosaur of Typrom, the little
the Cambodian stegosaur that's actually a pig with flowers.
So that article that he wrote on his website, Genesis Park, actually made it to Answers in Genesis.
Yeah, there's a lot of cross-fertilization going on there, and the longer it goes, the more logical that occurs, because there's only a small network of people who are fact claimants. There's only 50 fact claimants in anti-evolutionism that I've encountered so far. It's not a lot. And so there's a great deal of cross-fertilization and smorgasbording going on. And so long as they stay within their little lecture circuits, they tend not to bump into each other. But you have to remember what's going on at the grassroots as to people that will attend a lecture from a creationist at their church, and then they'll watch a Kent Hovind video, and then they may decide to buy a book where they'll pick up a Michael Behe book, and they kind of mush all of this stuff together into a new bouillabaisse that happens down at the grassroots. And one of the functions I'm trying to do in TIP is to keep track of that incoming data field, as well as all the technical literature, so that I know who the players are, and can theoretically help other people identify who the players are, and then steer them onto a methods approach as to how you're supposed to deal with them. That you don't go after the philosophy and the religion and methodological naturalism right off the bat, because that's jumping on their turf. No. You want to approach everything from a source methods direction. First of all, to identify where they are on the data field. So you ask them where their sources are, if they don't self-identify them. And then you can find out, of course, they'll never have checked them. And Mark Huffman, he's never come back for his other half of the debate, because we'd have to start talking about his sources.
Yeah, no, I think you held his feet to the fire enough for him to realize he was out of his depth.
And yet he didn't stop shooting his mouth off on me. He was saying about all this downward guy was bringing up this reptile mammal transition, and it's all sort of silly stuff that he keeps on going on. Well, I responded to him. I said, excuse me, it's a matter of data and sources. And I don't think that any of them can ever play that game. One of the guys that I bumped into, maybe he'll haunt, he always shows up. I think he's the brother of the Reverend Wilson that Christopher Hitchin debated. So he's an oddball set. They're from southern Idaho, and he has been showing up at the Darwin on Palousas for years and years and years, and I keep running into him. And each time I run into him,
Darwin parades down here and festivals.
Well, that's a collegiate. There are two big universities down there: the University of Idaho and the University Pullman, University of Washington down there. And they're literally like 5 or 6 miles apart. One of them's on one side of the state line, and the other one's on the other. And so there's a little straight road that goes there, and so they cross-fertilize a lot. So there's an awful lot of people down there. Ironically, Scott Minnick is at the University of Idaho. He's one of the bacterial flagellum guys, although he tends not to show up. I've never seen him show up at any of the Darwin on Palousas. Anyway, this week, this coming February is on the 9th. PZ Myers is going to be one of the speakers there. I'm not one of the speakers there. Why not? People should pester. Anyway, I'll zip. I've got gas in the car, so I can zip down there, because it's not very far. It's like 100 some odd miles, so it's a short jaunt.
Well, speaking of speakers, Peter and I watched a video of a speech that you gave. Peter, what was that video?
Oh, the one in Seattle?
You posted?
Yeah, I bumped into that on YouTube. I had never seen that, and because I watch a lot of videos of talks about creationism from both sides, actually, from the creationist side and from people like Aaron Ra. And this one popped up, and I had never seen James do a speech, and so that's when I tweeted, why isn't this guy booked more to do speeches? Because
yeah, I put the link up to it.
Well,
I think
I
that was
know.
when I did it to the Seattle atheists over there a couple years ago. And I was invited. I was a last minute pinch hit because they didn't have a speaker, and one of the people there used to be in the Spokane atheist bunch over here when he was in college, and he was now in Seattle. And he said, "Well, why not Downard? I mean, you know." And so, in a very short notice, they asked me, and I said, "Yeah, I can come over." And I even got a little bit of money off of it. There was a little stipend of $50 I managed to make off of that, and sold a couple books. So that was nice.
And they sent the fire department on you.
And I think I can do a pretty good speech, and I do a pretty good Q&A. Yeah, Pete Bogassian knows how good I am at Q&A.
I love how you handled the fire truck coming past.
Oh yeah, I like that too.
Completely muting you in everything you said at the moment. So, but yeah, if I look at that, then I'm amazed that you're not asked to do more talks, and I think
I'm amazed too.
If anything, we might have to contact a few people and see if we can.
Well, here's what I ask, and everybody that watches the show, please do. If you know anybody, help spread the word on it. If you know colleges or others that I can that want to hear me speak, let them know about me. If you know of book journals and magazines or others that do book reviews, let them know about my work so that they can find out about it and check on them on themselves and do some bloody reviews on it. I need all the word of mouth I can get, because apparently top down ain't going to work. We're going to have to do it bottom up, and I'm down here in the hole.
Yeah, what I wanted to say, because they mentioned it in the chat, and I was looking for it as well. I didn't get a notification of this video, and it seems that you have two channels, and this is one where you have the least amount of subscribers. So
I'm still way super weird used to trying to get things organized on that. The one that I think you bumped into, I think, was the one that I did in Seattle.
The channel we're on right now, RJ.
Oh, this one, yeah. The
channel we're on right now. That's not your usual channel. So I didn't get a notification, and I think a lot of people didn't get a notification. Because
this is very strange, because when I look up and set up a new field for it, the whole thing that I'm looking at in my creator studio on YouTube doesn't show up. So it suddenly switched. Literally, all of my videos were at one point visible, and then they changed their format, and suddenly it's gone. So
you have two channels.
I wasn't popping up on there.
You have two different.
So I don't know what to do on changing all of that stuff. I'm still too much of a novice on here. Everybody, the easiest way to get to me is to follow me on Twitter, because I put up a notification directly for it.
What the problem is you have two different channels, and this one is probably the one that people haven't subscribed to.
Yeah, and I, from my point of view, I only have one channel, which is my channel. I don't have another channel.
I just looked it up, and I only see one James Downer channel with 455 subscribers and 59 videos. That's all I see right now.
Yeah, and this channel only has 42 subscribers.
Oh. I didn't even. Okay, so this one is called.
I don't know how to link up on things, and some of the things that I was doing before on linking up previous videos, I still got to go back through.
I think I can help you out there, because it's just which email address you're logged in at.
That's another. There's another pesky thing.
If you're logged into a different email address, then it will automatically lead you to
well, I have been doing it in the same format from the get-go. So once we got that thing settled, it from my end is all default. And so how I can change it, I'm not doing anything else except through Google Chrome. So that's always the one that I know, but yeah, but
address
there's
you're
an
logged
email
into.
address on Google Chrome, and that's the one it recognizes me at. So whatever I've been doing for the last months has always been under exactly the same format. So it's treating me the same way each time. But the problem is YouTube just a month ago decided that suddenly my channel wasn't the same. And so it literally obliterated all of the links when I looked into the things where I looked under my channel. I can't find that stuff. And so it's very awkward.
James, that's not what happened. You have a second channel. So the things didn't disappear. You just came up.
Yeah, but
on
I've never done anything other than the one that I'm doing this on. I've been doing it under this same format, and therefore it would have been under the same channel. So how it gets funneled at YouTube's end, I don't know. I haven't done anything differently from my end.
How about like after the video, you take a look at the email address you're using right now on Google Chrome and make sure it is in fact the same one. I'm just saying, if that's not it, then you might want to email,
because it would be physically impossible. The only time I was getting into trouble is if I was trying to do something when I was on my AOL email. So Sai switched me all over to working on the one that's in the Google Chrome accent, and I've been doing it exactly the same way ever since. So whatever weird second channel it thinks it's doing, it wasn't anything I did at my.
Well, you might want to email YouTube then. You might want to email YouTube to inform them about the situation. So you could do that also, and they can probably fix whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Weird
Well, we're
going
past
on.
our hour, so I will now stop the broadcast. Let me put up my cute little logo from Doodak, because this is another charming thing that. Now I got to find my stupid screen share again. Come on, you little bastard. There you go. It sometimes is slow and sluggish to use the stupid cursor. There we go. And voila, Troubles in Paradise, Rude and James Downer. Thank you so much for that wonderful things. Thank you for the two of you on here. We had a far-ranging discussion plus my book plug, and we will see what happens in the near future. Signing off today.